This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Welcome to this episode of Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur. As always, I thank you for listening. This is episode 157, and it's a conversation with a wealth advisor by the name of James Woodall. Now, I've been developing my own Encore career since 2015, and I can help you build your Encore career with what I've learned in my journey and from an incredible group of mentors and teachers. So if you want to get off to a powerful start, please contact me. Well, we haven't talked much about the financial side of an Encore career, so in today's episode, we're going to step into that. Our guest on this show is James Woodall. He's a certified financial planner and owner of Woodall Wealth Management. He's located in Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. James has worked with people in a wide range, everything from considering retirement, as well as at least one of his clients was 95. So full range of people and their experiences. Some of the ideas that we're going to talk about are the myths about taxes in retirement and an Encore career, and how you should think through that. He always has some conversations with people about budgets and budgets at different stages of their careers. And then he has a set of 3 big questions that he asks of all his clients, and it'll be worth your while to consider them for yourself. And finally, he likes to encourage his people to set goals, not just financial goals, but goals of what do they really want to do. And he recognizes that those goals could be different in different phases of your Encore journey. With that, we'll get on to the interview. Welcome, James. Thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate that. And welcome. I'd like to start off by maybe having you describe a little bit about your journey and what you led to doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely, Lynn. Thanks for having me on. So a little bit about myself. So I've been in this industry for about a decade. Grew up around the oil field and then had a class in college about futures and commodities trading. I had no idea what that was. Because I went to school at Texas Tech, so everyone was literally trading cotton futures. And that's where I caught the investing bug. From there, I worked at a large mutual fund firm for quite a while, working as an advisor, supporting advisors, really just seeing what works and what doesn't work. From the various positions I held to then working at a little small shop and then at a larger corporation for us, I said, hey, you know what, let's start my own firm. I've seen what works, and I really like helping the people in relationships. So that's one of the reasons why I started Woodall Wealth Management, where we focus on family stewards and family businesses.
Yeah, and I believe you said one of the driving forces was actually the experience your grandfather had. Was that?
Yeah, it was. Well, my grandfather passed away. There wasn't as robust estate plan as I personally would do now for my clients. And when he passed, there was lots of changes that were happening. And then I guess you could say that when my step-grandmother passed a few years later, that was really when we saw those changes come into place. It really caused lots of issues in the family. We found assets, I think, in every bank, like one bank in every state. It was just all over the place. Like Bank of Hawaii was one of them. We're down here in Texas. And then also when his retirement, one of the things he liked to do was going to bring on as well was he did lots of rental properties, lots of rental homes. That's something that kind of kept his mind busy while he was retired. And we ran through that and ran into those issues. And it got to the point where we have an uncle that lived down the road from my father and I and my family, I guess you could say, about, let's say 10 minutes away, and I haven't seen him in 20 years. So caused a rift in the families. It's kind of why I'm doing this. So others don't have to deal with this as well, because it clearly had more of a lasting impact on me than I realized at the time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I thought we might lead off a little bit. So many of the people in my audience are either in retirement or preparing for retirement. But I wondered, what were maybe 3 to 5 things that you would say, hey, here's something to pay attention to financially as you're starting to make that next step?
Yeah. So number one, I beat this drum and I'll beat it to the day I die, is taxes increase in retirement. We don't ever think about that, but when we turn now 72, or if you're already taking those required minimum distributions, your taxes actually go up in retirement. So I'm a big fan of planning for taxes down that road, either through Roth conversions or owning a rental property where you can decrease your income by still gaining it, just working with a professional to really find that out. It's always a surprising time when you run a financial plan and we go through the numbers and I say, hey, when you turn 72, you're going to pay $150,000 in taxes. Are you ready for that? And people's jaws drop. It's always an eye-opening conversation. So that's probably number one. Number two is the 4% rule. I'm on the fence about it, to be honest with you, because in retirement, and this is the early years, it's the go years. The middle part of retirement's the slow go years, and the later part of retirement's the no go years. And depending on what you want out of life, your values, what you want to see in the late chapter of your life is going to depend on your expenses. So that 4% rule, it really depends on who you are and how you want to live your life. Candidly, I always say, if you're not working with a professional in retirement, just go chat with someone, even just to understand where you sit. That way you can understand where your gaps are. You don't have to worry about the market, which is probably a good thing to bring up now, is that while we are in the technical definition of recession, not everyone wants to call that right now, but we are in a recession. That's okay. We certainly have some headwinds that we're running across with the high inflation. We also have good signs as well with people going back into the workforce. Actually, as of last week, we officially hit our pre-COVID unemployment levels, which is a good sign. The reason why people are going back to work is because they, kind of ran out of those assets from the stimulus check. So again, headwind sign. So we have some headwinds coming up. But what I tell my clients is stick to your plan, keep investing how you're investing, stay where you're at. And if you have questions or comments or concerns, always reach out. And just enjoy life at this point. Hey, down here in Texas, we're enjoying the heat right now, and hopefully we get some cooler weather and rain soon. So that's going to be more conversations for us lately.
Sure. I can appreciate that. And you mentioned the different stages of retirement. And I think the thing I've been talking with people a lot and realizing is that even my peer group is living longer and actually living healthier longer. So all of a sudden, if I'd even thought about retirement, my picture originally was what my grandparents or my parents maybe did. And one, they just had shorter retirements because they didn't live as long. Now, yeah. None of us know for sure how it's going to go for us, but in general, all of a sudden, this idea that even if you work for 40 years for a company, it may be impossible to save enough to be retired for 30 years after that. So you may have to really rethink some of these things.
Oh, absolutely. It used to be when you retired, the common rule of thumb was you subtract your age from 100, and whatever that difference is, the bonds to stock ratio. That really worked pretty well when we were living 20 years in retirement, but now 20, 30, 40 years in retirement, it's a different conversation. And I'll be honest, it's hard to plan for at times. I had a client, it was awesome. He was great. He was 94 years old and he was still a teacher at Montana Tech University, and he rode his bike every day to work. And that guy was sharp as can be. So I picked up a lot from him, actually. He always said, ride his bike every day, keep moving, and swimming was his biggest passion. He picked it up in his 70s. And was a pretty prolific swimmer still.
Yeah. But yeah, that whole idea of that, and quite frankly, at least from my perspective, and I think others, is that we don't want to just sit in a rocking chair or play golf 5 times a week. I don't know. I can't even imagine trying to play golf 5 times a week for 20 years, So,
lose some big golf balls.
So whether we're making money or doing something else, we're going to want to remain active. But sometimes to start an Encore Career, it's going to take some money. I'm sure you've had people who, for what other reason, decided to start a business. Any tips you gave them as they were, and maybe it was not a brick and mortar, maybe it was a service business or something, but any tips that you've given them as to how to approach it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we retire, our culture used to teach us that, hey, all right, you're done. Go sit in the rocking chair, go play golf. Well, as I don't know, maybe it's in the past 10 years or so, but it seems like a lot of people want to keep working even more and more in retirement. And I think it's 3 things. So if we look at the fundamentals of people, so I would tell everyone people are people. And there's 3 things that we want out of life. To live a happy, fulfilled life is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Mm-hmm. So in retirement, we typically have that autonomy and mastery. And at times, some folks, want that purpose that I have my family and I love it, but I still want to do more, I want to scratch that itch. So starting a business is always an interesting one. For example, like my parents right now are looking at doing rental properties just for something to do in retirement. Mm-hmm. So when you're thinking about starting a business in retirement, find, what your skill set, what you're really good at, and candidly, something I think that you can have lots of flexibility with, whether that be consulting, a rental property, a passive income. I always say this when you're looking at it. So what I do for my folks is we have a budget. We understand where our income's coming from, security, any insurance or annuities or 401ks. And then we say, okay, here's our budget, add 10%. Of course, we always inflate the budgets over time with inflation, even though now it's so high. Still do typically 2.5%. So we know that our costs are going to go up, particularly healthcare costs later on. But when we're planning for a business, it depends on what we're going to do. So we have our mailbox money done. How much are you willing to invest into it? And then how can you challenge yourself to make it as low cost and as efficient as possible? So I always like to do this challenge. I've only done it once. Only one person's picked me up on it, which is you have $5,000, $5,000 to start a business, get it up and running. What can you do for $5,000 and what would it be? A lot of times it's consulting, starting up a website, super quick and easy, paying for the marketing piece, and then leveraging your network and just see what happens and charge consulting out. That's what I've seen a little bit more of. And then, of course, that challenge is always a fun challenge to try.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that budget is a great idea because it's easy to dabble on something. But if you, consider it a real business that you're either going to continue or fold, well, that I think makes it more real for you. And you're not just a hobbyist, I guess I'll say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think the best thing you can do to start a business, and I'll say this is for me too, was I tried to start 3 or 4 businesses that failed miserably. Absolute failures. One was called 5K MBA. I was like, let's go get an MBA for $5,000, which is absolute failure. But I learned so much that actually brought me to this path. And I think the most important thing to do is spend the money and set up a corporation. Because I think that's a very real thing. This is real now. This is actually happening. I think once you kind of figure out a rough idea of what you want to do, I would start up a corporation, see what happens, kind of get the ball rolling and just see that snowball effect really take place.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think too, again, with these longer lives, I recently read an article that said, even if you're 50, 60 or 70, you might want to consider a 10-year plan. What are you going to do over 10 years? Because you could easily have more than that. And as you talk to people about finances and things like that, do you describe, hey, you need to have a pretty long vision of what it is you're planning to be doing?
Oh, absolutely. So I use a goal-based planning method. So we're people. We have budgets and we follow the cash flow and everything. But at the end of the day, we're people. If I want to retire, I want to drive, I don't know, I'm a big car guy. I want to go drive my Mustang through the mountain. That's a goal. Cool. Here's roughly what it's going to cost. Let's plan to that. When we talk about even doing that 5-10 year planning thing, this is what I always kind of run my folks through is imagine today you won the lottery. What would you do different? And have that discussion. Then have that discussion even further where we go through 3 questions, which is the second question. Hey, imagine 5 years from now, you go to the doctor and the doctor's, hey, I don't know how we missed this, but you have a terminal cancer and you have a month to live. What would you do differently? And drill into that. And then go even deeper. Hey, we went to the doctor. I hate to say this, we missed this. You'd probably have a day or 2 to live. What would you do differently? When you have those discussions, you will typically find that some people will regret not doing something more than they regret doing something. So that's how I can kind of plan for those conversations. And then also say, what's your retirement dream? What do you want out of life? And if you can figure that out and have those interesting conversations and test and pull and some things you thought you want to do, you don't want to do, that's okay. We now know that's a route we don't want to go. And plan through and just keep asking those questions. So that's what I would do. I would also ask yourself those 3 questions. If you won the lottery, if you had 5 years, or if you had a day, and what do you want out of life? And then go from there. Because that's going to get truly to the fundamentals of who you are and what your values are. And we can operate from that way.
Yeah. And I'd like to come back to something you talked about earlier, where you talked about phases of retirement. I can't remember you described, but
the go-go, the slow go and no-go.
Yeah. Because I assume that's another part of the conversation you could have.
Oh, absolutely. It was at 2020 when COVID hit, RV sales exploded. You couldn't find an RV to save your life, and now you can find them everywhere. So tell me a little more about what you're thinking about on that question.
I think as you mentioned, starting a business or something like that. Okay, so you're going to be fairly active, we'll say, in the first portion of your retirement. And then the middle portion, you may be more considered semi-retired. In other words, maybe you're only working 10, 20 hours a week, maybe still active, or maybe just volunteer work. But then in the final stage, maybe you may be in a nursing home, but basically you won't be as active in business. So it maybe you'll be going to school or something, but you may have different activities at different stages of your retirement. So I was wondering how you might talk to people about that.
Honestly, just a conversation. So every situation's been so unique. I wish I could say I had a general idea of what it is outside of those three phases, because honestly, they're all so different. For example, I like to use my dad as an example because he's semi-retired now, you could say. And he's like, when I retire, I don't do anything but sit on the porch and just relax. I've worked hard enough my entire life. My mom's the opposite. She's like, I want to keep working. I want to keep doing something. I want to keep moving on. So it really depends. Think about you retire, let's say 65 to 75 or so, you're going to be the most physically fit in your retirement, generally speaking. The way to extend that, of course, is still work out, still lift weights. Saunas are a new thing I've heard about where inflammation is one of the biggest issues you can have. It's a leading cause of mortality. So if we do a sauna, apparently it's a 40% reduction in all cases of mortality. And they're fun, and it's just a good place to sweat and relax. I love them. So if you think about your go, go, go years, what are you going to do? You have all this time. You have the good amount of assets. What are you going to do? I really think you just sit down and figure it out for yourself. I wish I could say, hey, you should go do this. It's ultimately going to be your decision. My job is to help you out and build kind of a budget plan around it. There's a thing I'll send this to you as well that I got to go over as a value-based worksheet too. So we think about those big three questions. What are your values in life? If you want to go, go, go. If you want to work or if you have to work, take advantage of it. Find opportunities that either you can start your own with a rental property if you're in that position, or honestly finding a place where you can work part-time. I think about what I see around here, and COVID kind of really shook things up. It really kind of shook things up in retirement. So I'm curious to think about what you've seen and what you've experienced too, because this is for my knowledge as well, is what have you seen for those folks that are mid to late retirement post-COVID? Are they out there working now, or what have you seen or come across?
Some of them are working. What's interesting is, at least in the last year post-COVID, is the other thing. I worked in manufacturing and I talked with a lot of small companies. Well, they can't find anybody to work. And it's literally a people problem. And yet they'll say, oh, I'm aware of all these people that I worked with that they all said, I'd kind of like to do something in retirement, but I don't know how to do it. But now all of a sudden between the companies needing people and these people that are on the sidelines, there's an opportunity for them to actually go back to work. And it's probably going to be part-time. It may be on a contract basis or something like that. Most of them don't want to jump back into 50, 60-hour weeks. But on the other hand, companies are getting used to the idea, hey, if I can have this more senior person, one, they bring a lot of great experience. And two, in many companies, they're trying to bring new talent in. And a lot of the talent is coming from different places than they're used to or different backgrounds. And so having senior people there, even to serve as mentors and coaches, it seems to be gaining some steam. I won't say it's a full-blown thing now, but companies are saying, hey, this is part of our solution to the workforce problem. Is we got a whole bunch of people, millions of people out there that are on the sidelines that maybe don't have to be.
That's actually interesting you say that. So when I worked at a previous firm, we had developed a professional mentorship program with a lot of the senior folks in the company. And I will say I learned more from them just about life knowledge. And maybe that's the area to go to, is how do you become a mentor, business coach? How do you share that knowledge, that human capital and experience? And maybe that's the good way to go, especially now. It was huge for me. It was very helpful, very insightful. And of course, helped me as being on the younger side of my career, build that network to really jump ahead. I wonder if that's the way to go post-COVID for those that want to share the information and keep helping people out in a way that keeps them safe, keeps them busy and active. And hey, maybe even they're not stuck in a local area. Maybe that's the trick now.
Yeah, that's, I think, the other thing that it really showed us is how many things can be done remotely that we just weren't thinking of before, especially from a business owner perspective. Okay, yeah, I can get these people. Fred can be working 2 states away, but he can still provide mentoring for my employees that are here local. Some of these things that everybody got the idea, hey, it is possible.
Oh, even my industry, it was just so much better because instead of having to take a day off or half a day to come for an hour-long meeting and say, let's have a conversation in our pajamas. Like, I'm wearing a bathing suit right now underneath this. I'll be the first to admit. Maybe it's a good thing. It kind of forced people to move in different areas too. I know, for example, my parents live in New Braunfels where they retired. Everyone's moving out to the hill country in Texas. And you look around, it's just kind of people that you can tell are a little bored. Mm-hmm. I jokingly talk to my dad, and say, oh, the liquor stores are empty on Saturday. There's just nothing else to do here. I was like, you need to go to the liquor store. Maybe that's what you need to go do there.
Yeah.
That's your second Encore career is running one of those.
Yeah. And I didn't want to miss that, as you described, the no-go. I think people do need to say, hey, whatever resources you have, you'd probably need to plan. I know my mother's still alive and doing well, but assisted living places, you can easily be spending $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year on those things. Mm-hmm. So if that's going to be the last 5 or 10 years of your life, you still have to get ready for something like that, I think.
Yeah, those no-go years they're interesting. So you've had your whole entire life accumulate to this time. Is what do you want out of it? So when I do a lot of these conversations, especially for our folks that are older, it's what do you want out of life, out of your legacy? How do we have those conversations? What do you want to do? A lot of times it's gifting to grandchildren's education accounts. That seems to be a way that I like. Also gifting to your kids that are still alive for multiple reasons. One, you get to see that gift work. You get to see it directly to your grandchildren, give them a leg up. You also give, just honestly, it just feels good to give away and give. Mm-hmm. So I think people have really enjoyed that. And then we start talking about where you're going to live, what are we going to do with the health issues, really having those conversations, because depending on your insurance, Medicare isn't really going to cover a lot of that. So how do you plan for that? How do you have those conversations with your family members? Hey, I don't want to live, and I call them old folks homes, right? Retirement home or retirement community. I don't want to live there. I want to live on my property. What do you want out of life? Or even have those conversations about dementia. They're pretty tough. That's something that candidly scares me to death myself. So how do I have those conversations in my will? Do I have a durable power of attorney? Do I have a medical directive stating if XYZ happens, here's what my wishes are. So that way you don't have to stress about that. Mm-hmm. And that way you can keep living your life fully while I'm good. Here's what I want out of life. Just operate here. The no-go years are definitely the most interesting, I would say. From you have, let's say, 10 years. What are you going to do to maximize those last 10 years of your life? Mm-hmm. And what do you want out of those last 10 years? And it's everyone's so different. Like my grandpa is a good example. He, on my mom's side, he's 89 now, sharp as can be, and he still likes to work a little bit. So he's an Uber driver, and he likes it, because I meet the coolest people in the world. So that's what he does. He just keeps them active, keeps them sharp, and I will say he is sharp at 89 years old. Oh yeah, he is on the ball. He's quick. In
this conversation, you talked about family, and I know that's another piece of what you do just in general. So as you think about, hey, I'm going to start my Encore career. Okay, maybe I was in a corporate life all the rest of my life, and how do I go talk to my spouse, my kids, whatever, about, hey, I'm going to start this new career? From your perspective, how do you have those conversations or start them?
Yeah, there's a term called a family office in the world of wealth management. So typically a family office is reserved for folks that they have like $50 million in assets and up, where literally one family pays for their own advisor, realtor, lawyer, CPA, et cetera. What I do is I scaled that down to where everyone can do this. And so a big part of those family offices is actually having a recap at the end of the year, just like you have in business. Have a debrief, have a year-end review. What worked, what didn't work? What do you like about and so? So I think that's a good way to do it. It's one, start having those conversations. Let the family know what your thoughts are, because everyone has those discussions, but maybe they're not always out in the open. Mm-hmm. So have those discussions. And then there, I think, is a really good time to say, hey, guys, you know what? I want to start a business. Here's what I want to do, and here's how I'm going to do it. And then here is my expectations of you. A lot of times with the family businesses that we run into, I have a good mentor of mine running into this, where he runs a great firm, but his sons have no interest in it. Mm-hmm. So what is his succession plan? So maybe you're already starting to plan for a succession plan for your business, and you're working backwards. Say, hey, you know what? This is a gift for my family. I want to get this up and running for them to have something extra to do. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a series. I met a guy who has a series of rental properties, because it's always what I come across is these rental properties where he goes, this is for my family. I get the income from there. And then I say, hey, this is for you guys. But he's yet to tell his kids that, hey, these are for you, mm-hmm. because they're out in Northwest Texas That's where the properties are. And his kids live out, I think, in like Chicago, and I think one's in New York. Having those open and honest discussions about it, creating that environment where you can have those. Perks of being on the older side of the family is you get to have that authority. So take advantage of it. Say, hey, we'll start having these family meetings once a year. I like Thanksgiving just because I like to eat. So I think Thanksgiving's a good time to do it if I'm not too full or too busy watching the Cowboys go 8-8. Even if it's a 17-game season, they'll still go 8-8. But that's how I like to look at it, is just create the family office meeting, create that environment, and have that discussion. Hey, here's what I want to do and why. And then set the expectations with the rest of your family, what you expect from them.
Sure, I think you're the other thing that occurs to me is when people have been pushed into retirement or pushed into having to do an encore career, or the market crashes and all of a sudden people come running into your office and say, hey, what happens now? What are your strategies for talking people through those lean times, you might say?
Yeah. Step number one, just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath and then understand that you're not alone. I remember with the crash of 2020, the sharpest decline in U.S. history, and again, the sharpest return in history as well. Just take a deep breath, number one, and don't panic. It's okay. We got to just figure it out and see where we're at. So step one is understand your material needs. Mm-hmm. So I call this kind of the 4 horsemen of financial planning. Step one is have an emergency savings account. So in this case, when we think about what's happening is, what's my budget? Add 10%. Okay, this is what I need to live every month. Then do I have my emergency savings? Typically, if you're in retirement, 8 months is a good number in case something happens, like with a house. Your AC goes out or foundation issues or something of the sort, to pay for that. Then just make sure that, do you have any credit card debt? Where's your debt at? Because if you have debt in retirement, so even outside of a mortgage, that's going to start causing issues, start eating away at your returns. From there, it's what's your budget look like? What can we pare back? Are we doing any gifting for kids? Do I need to go back to work? Oh, okay, I do need to go back to work. Where can I find the most value for my time for the highest dollar at the quickest rate? So I think it depends on what's happening. So if we think about when COVID hit, I always had a great experience at Home Depot, finding the older folks that work there and they're telling me what to do. I had to fix something in the house. Well, that's not an option. So where do you find the most value for your time? I honestly would say, except for what it is, hey, we got to go get a job. Where can I go get a job? Start looking on like Indeed.com or LinkedIn and treat it like a full-time job. 8 hours a day applying for work, temporary work, finding ways to increase your assets or your income. And then because we now know what your budget's going to be, plus that 10% or so, and we know what we're running up against roughly with whatever's happening in the market, and we're staying calm, we can make the best decision from there.
Sure.
That's how I look at it. That's something I'm doing with someone else right now, which is step one, just take a deep breath. Don't panic. Just take a deep breath. And it will get better. Just know that it will get better. I don't know when or how, but it will get better. It's never not gotten better.
Well, I've seen the recession decade of the 80s. I've seen several recessions hit with 2000.com and then 2000. It always looks like it's bleakest and never going to turn around, but in practice, it actually has usually.
Yeah. And even add on to that, the market actually does very good after recessions. Typically, the market's driven by expectations of future results, right? So when we think about that, we overreact, we're people. And so typically it may go down more than it has to, or it's already priced in the worst issues. But because you've panicked and sold out, that's what can cause bigger issues than holding on for the long term, living off of Social Security or any dividends that you have coming out, or cutting back expenses where you can. Another thing, I hate to be a salesman, but insurance actually has good options for retirement. There's something that I use what's called an annuity that has like an income rider. That way our money is guaranteed no matter what. So the market's doing this, you don't care, because your income is guaranteed by these insurance companies that have very unique access. They have unique access to bonds where they can buy a bond for 100 years at an X percent. We don't have that kind of access, but these insurance companies do. Those might be good options to where you don't have to worry about that. You have the right tools in place where you're okay. But if you have to go back into it, take a breath, budget plus 10%, find the best option you can and see what comes up. And I think act early too is another thing, because you don't act early enough, maybe your market's saturated with employment, and then you have to start looking outside your market, drive further away from where you're living.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to thank you, James. This has been a great conversation, and I know my audience is going to appreciate it. We will have your contact information and your website, as well as I believe you have another opportunity for some free resources that people can look at. So we'll include those. Any other final thoughts you'd like to share with people as to how they can work with you, or what would you encourage people to do here at this time?
I love talking to everybody. Honestly, it's an opportunity to make a new friend. So I always tell folks to go on my website. There's a link right there to get on my calendar for a free consultation. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. Just honestly want to know who you are. Or just give me a call. It's 214-281-4496. And just give me a call and we can chat and see if I can help you out. If I can't, I'll find someone who can. And understand that, hey, I know we're going to got some headwinds coming up, but as long as you're patient and have faith in the future, you're going to be okay.
Great. Well, again, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate your being here on this episode. Well, best of luck to you, and I'm sure some people will maybe hopefully contact you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Again, many thanks to James for sharing his journey and the many insights that he has provided for people and provided for us. Just a quick recap of the topics. He shared with us some of the myths about taxes and retirement and an Encore career, some of the conversations we need to have around budgets, especially for different periods of our Encore career. And then obviously he shared the 3 big questions that he says each of his clients and you as our audience should be considering. In the show notes, there'll be links to James's website, as well as links to some guides and checklists that he provides. And I encourage you to contact him if you have any questions. We'll also have links to my website and my guides. So remember, with an Encore career, the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and you can do the work you love. So to get off to a powerful start, please contact me. You have the time, you have the attention, and the money to make this leap. So let me help you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.